The first one. What can you tell me about it? Josh? Good. So number one, the amplitude is equal to 3. It's the number in front. What else, Lil? Good. The midline is -2, which is moving down 2. Okay? What is the period? Yep. 2 pi. Excellent. Okay? One full rotation, which is talking about the period, one full cycle, is 2 pi units. Okay? Here. So this all comes from y equals a sine of bx minus c plus d. Okay? The a value is your amplitude. Okay? The b value, the number in front of x, changes the period. Okay? So if you have a number in front of x, like we're going to see in the next one, we'll go through that formula shortly. What we kind of talked about but really didn't touch upon is called your phase shift, okay, which you'll see today in terms of when we go through some practice. If you have x minus c, think of transformations, x minus h, what direction did you move in? To the right, x plus c or x plus h. To the left, that is called your phase shift, left or right, okay? Plus d is your midline, and you're moving either up or down. Okay. So if we move to the second one, what is our amplitude? 1. It's always what? It's always positive. What else is happening though? Reflected. Awesome. Okay. There is a reflection. What is our midline? 3. Okay, remember the midline is the center of the graph. Okay, that's what you always want to graph first. Now, to find the period, we have a number in front. Who remembers the formula? Go ahead, Amelia. Good. 2 pi over b. So we take 2 pi, divide by 2. One full rotation will be completed in pi units. Okay? How did we determine the increments? What do we have to do? Divide by 4. So for example, it's always 4. This is pi. Our x scale is always even increments. So you divide by 4. And you're adding 1/4 every single time. Hence, one of the rules or the tricks for filling out the unit circle. Then we have pi over 2, 3 pi over 4. So our midline for this one was 3. And our amplitude is 1. So our graph will be between 2 and 4. Remember, you graph your midline first, then apply your amplitude. Where does sine always start? Okay, instead of 0, what would it be here? What? 3. It's your midline, right? Sine always starts at your midline. Now it's reflected. Pi over 4, where would we be? 2, 3, or 4? Yep. 2. Pi over 2? 3. 3 pi over 4? And then pi. Okay? So the sine function starts at your midline, your maximum typically, midline, minimum, midline. But if there's a reflection, the maximum switch. Okay? Questions? We should kind of recall that. Yes? It's pi units, half the time. So our typical period is 2 pi.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay? So it would be double, it would be stretched out longer. Okay? Questions? So let's turn to page 6. All right. So again, here here's our chart. We started with sine, okay? Cosine, though. What is cosine of 0? 1. What is cosine of pi over 2? Cosine of pi? 3 pi over 2? And 2 pi. Okay. So this is different, okay, for cosine. We are starting now at the maximum value. Then we're at 0, -1, 0, 2 pi. Okay, so here is our parent function, okay, for cosine. This is our parent function, right? Our amplitude is still 1, okay? Our midline is 0. And for our parent function, the period is 2 pi, okay? So how we could determine the period, you always start from the y-axis. We start at the maximum, we end at the maximum. Okay, that is one full rotation. Yes? Yes. Okay, so one way to remember, okay, 1 is our maximum, then our midline, minimum, midline, and max. Okay, just like with sine, it was our midline, maximum, midline, minimum, midline. Okay, so anytime you see that 0, that is your parent function midline. Those are the 2 anchors. Okay, so let's look at transformations from A. Okay, so I don't know. Let's see. G of x equals 1/4 cosine of x. Okay, just looking at it, what is our midline? 0. Our midline is 0. Okay, our midline is 0. What is our amplitude? 1/4. So from your midline, wherever it may be, you count 1/4 above and 1/4 below. Because the distance from the midline to the max, midline to the min, is your amplitude. Okay, for cosine, where do we start? At 1/4, the highest y value. Then pi over 2, where do we go? Okay, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then 2 pi. Okay. For number 2, what is our midline? 0, same. Yep. Still 2 pi. There's no number in front of x, so it's automatically 1. We're going to see that later. Okay. What is our amplitude? 2. Okay. So we start at the midline, and we count 1, 2 above, 1, 2 below. Okay. Where are we starting? 2. Then where? 0. Then where? Then where? Then where? Good. All right. Number 3, what is our midline? 0 again. What is our amplitude? What is it? 3, but what's happening? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So since it's reflected, where do we start? -3. Then where? Then. Good. Then. Good. Good. Okay. questions? Yep. The plus or minus D on the outside. Okay, you're welcome. We're going to see it right now. Yep, we're going to see it right now. Okay, so this is when your amplitude changes. There's no plus or minus on the outside, so therefore the midline is automatically 0. Now we're going to see where that changes. Okay, so what is our midline of number 1? 3. Okay, the midline is the outside, so midline is 3. What is our amplitude? 1, because there's only 1 in front. So we count 1, 2, 3 is our midline. And then from our midline, we apply our amplitude top and bottom. So 3 plus 1, 3 minus 1, 2. So 2 and 4 is where my graph needs to be. Okay? So where am I starting? 2, 3, or 4? Where? 4, because it's cosine. Then where? 3, then, good. Okay. Cosine always starts at the maximum value. Here's our midline, is 3. Nope, that's our midline. Then our amplitude is 1. So 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. Okay, let's try number 2. What is our midline? And this is our midline. That's what we always graph first. Okay, what is our amplitude? 1, right? So -1 plus 1, what is our highest y value? 0. -1 minus 1, -2. So our graph will be between -2 and 0. Okay. Cosine, we're always starting where? Highest point, our maximum. So what is our highest y value? 0. So our max, then we go to our midline at -1. At pi, we're at our minimum. -2. 3 pi over 2, we're back at -1. Then 2 pi, we're back at 0. Okay, maximum, midline, minimum, midline, max. Okay, try number 3. Okay, what is our midline? -2, good. Okay, what is our amplitude? 1. So our highest y value would be what? Our lowest? Good. Okay, because the amplitude is 1. So for cosine, where are we starting? -1, then where? Then? Good. Excellent. How many of you guys did get that? Okay, good. Just like we did with sine, we started with A separately, D separately. Now we're going to combine the two. Okay? So, the first one, what is our midline? 1. Okay, that is our midline. What is our amplitude? 1, but what's happening? Reflection. So we're still going to, from our midline, apply our amplitude. 1 plus 1 gives us 2. 1 minus 1 is 0. So we're between 0 and 2. Okay? Now, cosine. We normally start at the maximum, but since we are reflected, where are we starting? At the minimum, which is 0. Then where? Then? Try number 2 on your own. You know how to do both separately. Now put these guys together. Midline, go. What is it? -2. You guys are so quiet. -2. What is our amplitude? 2. So our highest y value? Lowest? Okay, where am I starting? 0, then where? Then where? Then? Good. Good. Excellent. Good, you guys. Right? Yeah. The minimum from your midline, you subtract your amplitude. So 2, -2, -2 gives you -4. Okay, so you're adding above and subtracting. So the distance has to be the same on either side. Okay? For number 3, what is our midline? 2. Okay. What is our maximum? Good. What is our minimum? 1.5. Okay, because all we did was 2 plus a half and 2 minus a half. Where are we starting? 2.5, then where? Then where? Then? Yep. Okay. So, like we talked about last class, it is extremely difficult to see the changes with these graphs on a scale that we create, right? The y-axis. So that's why towards the end, very end of Friday's class, we saw on the calculator of the different changes. So if you need to, just to make sure, you could always do that as well. But your scale has to be in radians, okay? Which we'll see towards the end if we need to, all right? So we went through amplitude changes, vertical shift, up or down. Now we're looking when we have a b value, okay? So to find your new period, it's 2 pi over b, okay? The b value is in front of x. The b value is in front of x. All right? So now, what is the b value number 1? 2. So it's 2 pi divided by 2. What do we get? Pi. So 1 full rotation has to happen in pi units. Okay? All right. Now to find the scale, what do we have to do? So that means these increments, excuse me, I got a cough. Excuse me. Right, so we start with pi over 4, right? What would come next? Pi over 2, then what? Good. All right, so those of you that weren't here, to find your new period, there's a number in front of x. You take 2 pi, divide by that number, and you get the new period. So 1 full rotation has to happen in pi units, okay, from start to finish. For cosine, that means at 0, we're starting at the maximum. At pi, we're ending at the maximum, okay? So that determines the period. To find the scale, you always divide by 4. So pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and pi. What is my midline for this function? 0. Our midline is 0. What is our amplitude? 1, -1. So for cosine, where am I starting? 1, then where? Then where? Then 0, and then 1. Okay. All right. So for number 2, what is the period? How do we find that out? It's 2 pi over 1/4. How do we get rid of that fraction? Reciprocal. So what's our period? 8 pi. So we know one full rotation has to happen in 8 pi units. So what's our x scale? What does it go up by? 2 pi. Good. 8 pi divided by 2. Oh, divided by 4. Sorry. 2 pi. 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi. What is our midline? 0. Amplitude? Okay, where am I starting? Then? Good. All right. So, we did go through sine last class, cosine this one, which went a little faster because we already know the transformations. The pattern might be different, but transformations stay the same. Okay? Some people are still finishing. I'm going to turn to the next page in a second. Okay? So, I want you to turn to the next page and look at number 2. Okay. It says give the amplitude and period of each function, then write an equation of each graph. Okay? So, anytime you're trying to write an equation, you're always starting from the y-axis. The reason I'm giving you a starting point of the y-axis, because I could come up with many different equations this graph could be, with transformations left or right, up or down, whatever it is. So always start with the y-axis. Okay? Where is this graph starting? At 2, which looks like it's the what? Max, right? So which graph, sine or cosine, typically starts at the maximum? Cosine. So this would be a cosine graph. Okay, starting from the y-axis, this would be a cosine graph. Well, where do I end up with the maximum again? Pi over 2, right? Because think of the rotation for cosine, right? Max, midline, minimum, midline, max. So when we go from starting here, where are we going to end up at the max again? The first maximum is at pi over 2. So from 0 to pi over 2, our period is pi over 2. One full rotation happens in pi over 2 units. And obviously it continues the pattern. Okay. Who can determine my midline? Coop? Yep, our midline is 0. Right? What would be our amplitude? Yeah, M. 2, good. If the midline was to change, okay, another way you could find the amplitude, okay, count from the minimum to your max. So, starting here, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 divided by 2. That's your amplitude. Then to find your midline, 2 minus 2 gives you 0. So do you guys see that? Okay, why am I dividing by 2? Because think, it's the center of the circle. You're dividing it in half. Okay? So now, I need to write my equation. What we know already is y equals 2 cosine, our midline is 0. How do we find that b value? Well, that's the only piece we're missing of this equation. Excellent. Good. Because the formula is period equals 2 pi over b. Like Amelia said, we know what the period is. It's pi over 2. Set it equal to 2 pi over b. how do we find out what b is? Go ahead, love. Cross multiply. So pi times b, 2 times 2 pi. Okay. Then what do we do? Divide by pi. So what does b equal? 4. So here's our equation. Questions? Okay, good work. Right, so for b, we're starting at the y-axis. What graph do you think? Go ahead. Sine. Okay. Sine graph. Okay. What is my period? Careful. Careful. It's sine. Sine, sine, sine. Sine starts at our what? At our midline, right? When does it officially go through the cycle? Because we have midline, max, midline, min, pi. Good. Okay. What is our amplitude? 3. Midline? All right. So you have everything you need to create your equation. Go ahead. Follow A as, use A as some help. My equation. Devin, go ahead. Excellent. Good. Y equals 3 sine of 2x. How many of you guys got that? Good. All right. Perfect. So I'm going to tell you your practice in a minute. Most of you guys will finish it within class. Okay. So one thing, E and F. Some of you might have tried to figure these out, but this is the first time we're looking at phase shift. Okay. You will have to identify. You will not have to graph it. Okay. So phase shift just means left, right. Okay. So if we look at E for a second, what is our amplitude? Jason? 4. Is this reflected? Yes. Is there a vertical shift meaning midline change? Yes. Down 2. Okay. Now, the number in front of x does not affect the phase shift. You're just looking at x minus or x plus. What direction are we moving in? Right. We are moving to the right. Pi. What is the period? 2 pi over 3. Okay? So, this is what you would have to do if they want you to just identify. Yes?
Kind of two-parter based off the first one. Do we have to identify it on the graph?
No.
How would you, theoretically, how would you see it on a graph?
If you wanted to start, say, this graph here and be a reflective sine graph. That's how you will see it. You're shifting to the right, pi over 2.
Yes.
You will not have to worry about it, so I'm not even going there. Okay, what else? What was your two-part?
That was the two-part.
Oh. Okay. Yep.
So should we do the right pi would just be all the way to pi, or would you go
Yep.
right over?
Nope. So from here, from the starting point, this graph would start there. Jason?
So when you have a period like pi over 3, each, like, the x
Yep. Okay. Hold on one second. So I want you to circle as we go through this, okay? Because this is your practice. Those of you that were not here, check Google Classroom. It's also highlighted on here as we go through. So I want you to circle D and F. Okay, this is page 8 and B, 2B. Okay. Page 9, you already did C and E. Thank you. D and F are the ones I want you to circle. Next page where it says 6.4 graphing. Okay. 1A, B, D, and F. And then 2A and 2B. Yep, classwork and homework. It's very short. 2A and 2B on page 10. Okay? So, those are the practice. You may get started on it. Those of you that were not here, this first part was homework. Then this first graph, and C and E. Okay? Yes. Yep. Okay, so that is your homework, classwork, pretty much classwork. I think you guys will be done by then.